Welcome to your review PowerPoint for Articles of Confederation and the early U.S. government. This is just part 1. In the next quarter, we'll do part 2. So they wanted a government that had enough power to do its job, didn't give anyone too much power, considers the needs of all states, lets people have a say, and protects individual rights. It seems like they wanted a lot out of this government. In 1777, the Americans wrote their first plan for government in a document called the Articles of Confederation. It was our government for the first 10 years. So, in this very first attempt, we have some words to define, like confederation. Remember, a confederation is a group of individuals united together for a purpose. And in their case, their purpose was becoming independent from Britain. So under the Articles, each state is independent and has its own government, basically operated like its own country. It had its own currency, its own people in charge, and its own laws. Each state will send one representative to the Congress of Confederation. The Congress was the only central government. There was no president. And in Congress, each state got one vote. Now, they could send multiple representatives, but each state only could cast one vote, no matter how big or how small their state was. So this sounds great. States get to keep their power and independence. You don't have a government telling you what to do. And Congress has the power to create a military to protect all of the states. You can't go too fast because Congress had no way to enforce its laws. It had to depend on the states to do that. Congress had no power to collect taxes to pay the military, which was very dangerous because the military was trained and of course they deserve to be paid. And if you don't pay them, they're going to rebel, which is exactly what happened. The Articles could only be changed if all of the states agreed. That's going to be a problem. All right, so we have some things to think about. Give yourself a thumbs up or thumbs down whether or not it's true or false. Under the Articles of Confederation, a president would lead the country. What do you think? That's false. There's no president. There's only one branch. It's just Congress. There's no executive branch, no judicial branch. How about this? States would be independent under the Articles. Yeah, that's absolutely true. The Articles of Confederation were easy to change. No, they were not easy to change. All 13 had to agree to any changes made. The more people a state had, the more votes it got in Congress. Is that true or false? No, that's false. Each state got one vote. Congress did not have the power to collect taxes. That's absolutely true. They could say, "Can I have some taxes, states?" And the states could say, "No." Congress could pass laws and force states to follow them. What do you think? Oh, of course that's false. That's one of the main weaknesses. Congress had to depend on the states to enforce the law. And if states chose not to, then states didn't have to. The Articles of Confederation created the first American government. Yes, that is absolutely true. Let's look at some of the weaknesses and the results of those weaknesses under the Articles. So, our first one, you needed 9 states to pass a law. What's the result? It's very hard to pass laws. Changing the Articles required 13 states to agree. So that means it was pretty much impossible to change the powers of Congress. Like if they wanted to change it to say states have to obey, they would need all 13, and they were never going to get that. Congress had no power to collect taxes. That means the government didn't have enough money. It was in huge debt after the war. It could ask the states for money, but it could not demand it. Congress had no power to enforce the law. That's absolutely true. They had to rely on the states. Something needed to change, especially with Shays' Rebellion. But people didn't want a central government to have too much power. That's what they just fought against in the Revolutionary War. The states decided to put aside some of their differences and come together to try and solve the problem of forming a new government. So the old idea, of course, the Articles of Confederation, legislative branch making the laws. They got together in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787 to come up with a new plan. What was it? Have 3 branches of government. Let's look at these now. So we still have that legislative branch to make the law, and the executive branch to carry out the law, and the judicial branch is going to interpret the law. So if you look, we added executive and judicial. That's very important. The thing is, we had a conversation. What's the legislative branch going to do? How do you decide how many votes each state should get? So let's think about this. Everybody gets to send representatives to the legislature, but which states would have more power if the more people a state had, the more representatives it got? That's right. More people, more power. That's going to make some smaller states pretty mad. What about this? Which states would have the most power if each state got 1 vote, no matter how small? Now, in our class discussion, some of you guys seem to think that, oh yeah, that means everybody is equal. But the thing is that proportionally speaking, actually, people in the small states would have more power. The example we talked about was this. Let's say I have a group of 3 people and a group of 30 people, and I give 1 bag of M&Ms to each group. That means the group of 3 shares the same size pack of M&Ms that the group of 30. Is it divided equally? I think all of us can say that the people in the group of 30 are going to be pretty jealous of the people in the group of 3. Of course, if you don't like M&Ms, I guess you'll be fine with it. So we have 2 plans. We'll first talk about the Virginia plan. So they had the legislative branch have 2 chambers. And they said the number of votes for each state is going to depend on the state's population. You're going to have larger states would have more power. You also have this other plan that got a lot of traction, the New Jersey plan. It basically, like our play said, was the AOC rebate. You still only have 1 chamber. Each state still only gets 1 vote. And smaller states still are going to have more power. Now, it did change a few things to make what Congress did more powerful, but again, it was the AOC. So the Virginia plan, just to note, that Virginia is a large state, so that's where you see their benefit, and New Jersey was a small state. So had a small population, Virginia had a large population. So what do you think? Is it more fair for every state to have the same amount of power, no matter how few people live there? Or should states with more people have more power? So it's not so simple to say everyone should have the same amount of power or large states should have more power. If we give the larger states more power, what's to stop the large states from overpowering the smaller states? Let's say you have Virginia and New York team up together and they have the most representatives to say, we think the larger states should pay less taxes. All right, let's put it to a vote. And of course, they have more votes than the smaller states, so they would win. That's not fair either. But if you have a whole bunch of small states, it's like our example with the M&Ms. 3 people sharing a bag versus 30 people sharing the same size bag. That's also not fair. So we had to go in and make a compromise. to get to the Constitution. So, we have something called the Great Compromise, and it was still very similar to the Virginia plan, but it brought in part of the New Jersey plan for our legislative branch because it divided Congress into two houses. So one house was the Senate, and each state gets 2 votes. This is what we have today. Wyoming has less than 500,000 people. They get 2 senators. California, more than 35 million people, and they get 2 senators. And then we have the House of Representatives. The number of votes depends on the number of people. California, I believe, has 53 representatives in the House. Wyoming has 1. That's called proportional representation. So it's about 1 representative per approximately 750,000. Of course, if you have less than that, like Wyoming, you automatically get 1 rep. So the Senate is equal representation and the House of Representatives is proportional. Hopefully this helps. Good luck, everyone. Make sure to check out Chapter 5, Lesson 1 answers.